Depending on when you're watching this, it's a few days before or a few days after Christmas. But either way, hope you're having a great week. Well, we're continuing in that unit that's entitled Irrefutable, Prophecies that Point Us to Jesus. We're in the fourth lesson this week, which is called The King Who Reigns Forever. We'll be in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, and then in Luke, chapter 1, verses 26 through 33. And the point of this lesson is that Jesus rules his kingdom now and forever. Well, in the first lesson of this unit, we looked at Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14, and learned that when Isaiah penned those words, Judah had been in rebellion against God. Then in chapter 8, Isaiah wrote down what the Lord told him about the Assyrian invasion, that it was a punishment for the nation. And the last two verses of chapter 8 say this: "Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward, will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness." Well, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, that sets the stage for chapter 9. And a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the first three verses of that chapter. And as a refresher, here's what verse 1 says: "Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan." It started off by saying that there will be no more gloom for those who were in distress. And in the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles. God disciplined, but he was going to restore it. And not just restore, but that area that was devastated would become an area of honor. The tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, they settled in the northern part of the kingdom, and they were the first couple of tribes that were deported by the Assyrians. But even though these areas were in darkness at the time of the writing, something great was going to happen in that area. Now, it wasn't going to happen in their lifetime, but several hundred years later. The areas occupied by Zebulun and Naphtali were the region of Galilee in the time of Jesus. The towns of Nazareth and Cana were in this area, towns where Jesus grew up, where he performed his first recorded miracle. Now, at the time of Isaiah, the land was in spiritual darkness. The Jewish people had rebelled against God, and they were being punished by the Assyrian captivity. But God was going to use that area that was first to be captured to become the hub of ministry for the coming Messiah. Now, skipping down a few verses in Isaiah 9 takes us to the first set of verses for this week's lesson, verses 6 and 7. Now, if you're a fan of Handel's Messiah, these verses are the text for movement 11. Continuing with the thoughts set forth earlier in the chapter, of the coming light, the coming Messiah, Isaiah wrote, "Unto us a son is born." Us, the people of Judah. The son would be born, indicating his humanity. And then he continued, "Unto us a son is given," indicated that the son would be a gift. He was already in existence. And the government will be on his shoulders. Now, that's an odd phrase, isn't it? It means that he would shoulder the responsibility of the government, that he would be the sole ruler. And then there are some names, some titles listed there that he would be called. Let's look at those. Wonderful Counselor. Now, in the King James, those are listed as separate titles. Wonderful, Counselor. But in most modern translations, they use wonderful as an adjective to the noun counselor. A wonderful counselor, which it follows the pattern of the subsequent titles that are listed there. Now, the word for counselor, it denotes one of honorable rank who has great wisdom to advise. And how could this Messiah be such a great advisor? Because, as we know of Jesus, all knowledge belongs to him. If you've ever counseled someone, it's difficult because perhaps the person's not being 100% honest with you, or maybe they don't know the whole situation, the whole story behind what's going on in their lives. But Jesus, who knows all, is the ultimate counselor. You can't withhold truth from him. He knows all and is the ultimate, the wonderful counselor. And then there's the term mighty God. Now let's remember that Jesus was and is God. Not God the Father, but God the Son. He is fully God, and this child, this Messiah, would be fully human as well. And then we get to the everlasting Father. But wait a minute, I just said that Jesus was not, that Jesus was God, but not God the Father. So what does that mean? Well, let's note now that in the Old Testament, the word Father is rarely used to describe God. As a father has leadership over a family or a clan or a tribe, so will Jesus, the Messiah, have leadership over his people. And not just for a short time, but for all time. And finally, Prince of Peace. Now, you're probably familiar with the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. And this word, though, it means more than a lack of conflict, even though it does include that. It also includes the concepts of wholeness, completeness, well-being, all those things in one. And at the end of time, when this prophecy is completely fulfilled and Jesus reigns, there will be no more wars. Jesus' rule will be one of peace. Which leads us into the next verse that talks about the reign of the Messiah. He will reign with greatness. His authority will be limitless, and his reign will produce an eternal peace. Now look at the words that describe his reign. Peace, justice, righteous, eternal. You know, those words also describe the character of Jesus, don't they? His reign will 100% match his character. Now let's go over to the New Testament passage this week in Luke chapter 1. In the first part of that chapter, we have the story of Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. They were both very old, according to verse 7, and they were unable to have children. But it was foretold by the angel Gabriel that Elizabeth would have a son, and we know him as John the Baptist. Now, do you remember how Elizabeth and Mary were related? Well, in Luke chapter 1, verse 36, in the King James, it states that they were cousins. But newer translations use the word relative, which really is a better translation of that word. But whether they were cousins, or Elizabeth was Mary's aunt, or they were related by marriage or whatever, it really doesn't matter. But they were related, they were close enough that Mary went and spent some time with Elizabeth. Now, in our lesson text this week, verses 26 through 31, we see that when Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant, that same angel, Gabriel, went to visit Mary of Nazareth in Galilee. Now remember, Galilee was the area where the Messiah was going to come from, that Isaiah prophesied about. So God's doing the impossible here. He's got two babies that are going to be born. One's going to have parents who are too old to have kids, and the other, Mary. Mary was a virgin. Now, some may have a problem in believing the virgin birth, but here's what I've always said. If I can believe that God created everything out of nothing just by speaking it into being, then I have no problem with the virgin birth. In fact, if you think about it, Adam didn't have an earthly father either, did he? So, this virgin, this Mary, she was pledged or betrothed to Joseph, a descendant of David. In the next couple of verses 32 and 33, we can begin to see the fulfillment of the Isaiah 9 passage that we looked at a few minutes ago. He'll be called the Son of the Most High. This child is going to be from God. He will come from the line of David and reign forever. He would have an everlasting kingdom. Jesus is the King who will reign forever. Well, next week we're going to be in Luke chapter 2. We're going to be studying about Jesus as the light and the glory of God. We're going to be looking at a prophecy concerning Jesus that it was not made by an Old Testament prophet, but by an old man whose prophecy is recorded in the New Testament in Luke chapter 2. All right. Hope you have a Merry Christmas. Pray for your class. Pray with your class. And let's be the salt and light that God's called us to be. Thank you guys for watching.